So good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you can hear me well. Very warm welcome to our today's panel discussion, Hidden Truth about relationships between recruitment practices and human trafficking for labor exploitation and different forms of labor exploitation in destination countries. My name is Vineta Polatside. I am a senior advisor and head of the unit at the Council of the Baltic Sea States, and we are coordinating human trafficking issues in the Baltic Sea region. And I will be moderating our discussion today. This event is organized in a framework of a transnational project named Competence Building, Assistance Provision and Prosecution of Labor Exploitation Cases in the Baltic Sea region. And it's coordinated by us, the Council of the Baltic Sea States, and also by the Ministry of Interior of Latvia. And I also would like to use this opportunity and to express my gratitude to the Swedish Gender Equality Agency and also to the CBSS Project Support Facility Fund for financing this activity. Today, findings of 4 reports conducted in Germany, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland will be presented, and these are first deliverables of this transnational project. There are another component in the project. We are conducting also research in Sweden, Poland, Norway, and Denmark, and we are looking why cases of trafficking for labor exploitation are underrepresented in courts, and also when it comes to prosecution. And also we are looking into the gaps that hamper effective combating of human trafficking for labor exploitation. So there might be another event later on focusing on legislation. To start, in the Baltic Sea region, human trafficking is not tolerated. The society is aware of risk factors that facilitate this crime. Perpetrators are vigorously pursued and prosecuted, and victims of all forms of human trafficking are adequately assisted. If we lived in an ideal world, this statement might be true, but unfortunately for now, it's only a vision it's a vision of the Council of the Baltic Sea States Task Force Against Human Trafficking. So the questions we will be looking to answer today are: what does the human trafficking landscape really look like? And is the Baltic Sea region equipped to fight human trafficking for labor exploitation? So the authors of 4 country reports will present today the complicated relationship between research countries and trafficking for labor exploitation. And with great pleasure, I would like to welcome our 4 speakers and authors of these research reports. I will not go into the biographical, sorry, I cannot pronounce details, as you probably all read, how accomplished our speakers are and how experienced, but very welcome to Luiza Lupascu from Germany, Gita Miruskina and Ilze Norvaisha from Latvia, Dr. Reda Sirgediene from Lithuania, and Dr. Julia Muraszkiewicz from Poland. Before we go into specific questions, some housekeeping rules, just that we can keep our communication and discussion smooth and that there are no any noises. Please keep at all time your microphones muted. Camera you can leave on or switch off as you prefer. And you, of course, will be given chance to ask questions to our presenters. But I would kindly ask you to write questions in the chat, and then at the end of the discussion we will have time to ask questions. And then during this question and answer session, if you have any comment or any other issues you would like to raise, then you can also raise your hand and we will give you word. So now, without any further delay, I would like to ask our presenters to give a short background on a problem and outline what the current relationships between your country and forced labor are. And as the first one, I would like to give word to Luiza and then to Latvia. Please, Luiza, floor is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be part of this online conference. Thank you for the invitation. And yeah, regarding your question, Violetta, I would like to mention a few things about the relationship between Germany and the labor exploitation, forced labor issues. In general, like labor exploitation cases have emerged and are known for a long time in Germany, especially in specific sectors like the meat processing industry, the construction site sector, and agriculture, just to name a few. And nevertheless, in the last 5-6 years, the topic of labor exploitation, forced labor, gained more and more attention. First, due to the hard work of the NGOs working in Germany. Second, due to specific projects, but also to the actions taken by the Labor Ministry, the Federal Labor Ministry in Germany. For example, through the implementation of the Federal State Working Group, or also through the financing of the Service Center Against Labor Exploitation and Human Trafficking. The third point I would like to mention to answer this question, Vineta, is the pandemic. The pandemic brought into light a few very interesting things in Germany. First, it became more than clear, even if it was not clear enough before, that there is a big dependence of migrant workers in specific, especially low-skilled sectors, like the agricultural sector or the care works. This came very clear to light in this year during the pandemic. I give you an example. Despite the closure of the borders in Germany in this period of time, the government organized the transport of about 80,000 seasonal foreign workers coming to Germany from different Eastern European countries for the months of April and May. So this was due to the need of the asparagus and strawberry harvest, for example. The second point is the care work sector, where it also became very clear that there is a big depend on migrant workers in this sector, coming from Poland, from Romania, but also from third countries like Ukraine lately. And in this period of time where the borders were closed, they were not able to re-enter the country. So there was a big lack of this workers during the pandemic time. What I would also like to mention is the widespread exploitative working and housing conditions that came out now through the meat processing crisis that went all over the media. I think also above the frontiers of Germany, and the actions that the Labor Ministry took into actions to fight this bad working condition in this sector. There is now a new legislative action to fight labor exploitation and forced labor on the way, in the making, regarding the meat processing industry, and they want to prohibit the contracts of work and the temporary work to avoid labor exploitation, which it's planned to be in place from 1st of January 2021. I think this is what's the most important links when it comes to the relationship between Germany and forced labor, but we can discuss further maybe later.
Thank you, Luiza. And now, Ilse, could you please tell us what the situation is in Latvia?
Yeah, hello everybody. So in Latvia, forced labor is kind of new phenomena, and only in 2019 we officially registered first case of forced labor when 16 work migrants were recognized as victims of human trafficking, and they were from Tajikistan. And in this year, additionally, 6 more persons from Uzbekistan were also recognized as victims of this forced labor. And yeah, now in 2020, 9 months have passed and we already have 26 victims of forced labor. Only 2 are from Latvia and 24 are migrants. And yes, and after this first case, more and more new cases were recognized. And in Latvia, 3 main processes are influencing forced labor. And first is the lack of the workforce, which is getting bigger and bigger in fields like agriculture, construction, and manufacture. And we have employers who lack the workers, so they are willing to hire migrants from third countries. So also because of that process and many others, the migration flows are getting increasing and getting bigger, and also poorly regulated system of agencies that offer temporary workforce. And these agencies also in Latvia are something new that workers don't understand till the end, and also people don't understand them. Society doesn't understand them that well. So what they do is that they recruit the workforce, and different employers are renting workers, and then these employers deal only with those agencies, not with the workers that actually work there. And there are a lot of non-regulated things, a lot of loopholes that it's hard to control, and this is basically the situation right now. The main things, but I think also other things we will discuss later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving us an overview. And now we are going to Lithuania. Reda, please.
Hi, everybody. I would like to tell you a bit about the relationship between recruitment practices and exploitative labor situations abroad as regards the Lithuanian research and the Lithuanians. Based on the research, Lithuanians appear under exploitative labor situations abroad using the services of private temporary agencies or private employment agencies. There is also a possibility to use the services of the public agency, which is only one such agency in Lithuania. It's the employment services under the Ministry of Social Security and Labor. And actually, during the research, I couldn't reveal any risk for job seekers if they decide to use the services of this public agency. However, the risk increases for the job seekers which decide to use the services of private employment agencies. In the research, I analyzed 2 groups of the private employment agencies: the agencies or legal persons and the middlemen or natural persons. If we speak about the services of temporary agencies, so there is some scheme which is broadly used to trap Lithuanians which look for jobs abroad. First of all, there are recruitment agencies in Lithuania which are registered here and are run by Lithuanians, and which send Lithuanians to temporary work agencies in other countries, to the agencies which also are run by Lithuanians there. Or they are sent to local businesses registered in the country of destination. What was very interesting for me to discover that those businesses in the country of destination mostly are run by managers who originate from post-Soviet countries, including Lithuania. And those temporary agencies are run by Lithuanians, as I have mentioned. What was very important to disclose that there is the interrelation between the recruitment agencies in Lithuania and the temporary work agencies and businesses in the country of destination. What I have found out that the managers or owners of the companies here in Lithuania and in the other countries are the same. They are like the same family members, like the father and the son, or they are relatives, or they are friends from all the times. It means that job seekers are like in a closed circle. If they want to complain as regards exploitation in the country of destination, they cannot, because if they say to the employer says that, look, I am doing everything properly. It was the recruitment agency who didn't give the correct information. If the job seeker applies to the recruitment agency, he's told that, look, it's the employer's business. We have done everything properly. So this close chain of the recruitment and employment agencies or employers in the country of destination actually that do not allow the job seekers to issue complaints. And on the other hand, it's very difficult for law enforcement to disclose those exploitative situations because it's like a closed chain. Everything is done like by one group, recruited and transported, transferred and received, as well as exploited. However, the highest risk to appear in exploitation in the country of destination appears if a job seeker decides to use the services of natural persons or middlemen. And there are also two options. There are middlemen who offer employment services and temporary work agencies in the country of destination. And those agencies in the country of destination offer Lithuanians for local businesses, mostly run by people originating from that country or from Pakistan and India. Or there is another option usually offered for job seekers. They are offered jobs at local businesses led by managers from post-Soviet countries, including Lithuania. Some of the middlemen work also for those businesses in the country of destination. It means, again, it's a closed circle. What was very interesting to reveal as well as regards the relationship, that middleman has a set of acquaintances and contacts via which they spread the information on potential jobs abroad. It means they use a lot of people to spread the information, expecting that there are job seekers among them, and some of the people will be trapped anyway. So as regards the relationship between the recruitment in the country of origin and the exploitation in the country of destination, I shall say that yes, Lithuanians appear in this situation, and yes, there is this relationship, according to my research.
Thank you, Reda. And I just wanted to ask you additional question. If when they use the people, labor migrants, use the services of these shady private recruitment agencies or word of mouth, are they actually aware of risk factors? Do they have it at the back of their head that something might go wrong? Or they do not really think about the risks involved? From your research, could you please comment on that?
It's a good question. I asked the interviewed migrant workers who experienced exploitation about this, whether they have noticed some risk, whether they have analyzed the situation, the content of the proposal, etc. Actually, I was told that some of the migrant workers travel even if they do not know who will be the employer in the country of destination. They are just told by those agencies here in Lithuania, which recruit people, that look, all the information will be given as a destination, just go and you will see there. And people do not check who is the employer. If it is a middleman, they do not ask the name of the middleman. Even they do not know who recruited them. And on the other hand, they do not know where they go. However, there are some reasons why they don't do this. And I will look through briefly. I have analyzed two reason groups, why they accept the job proposals. The first group is economic situation is clear for everyone. But the second group, what I have found among Lithuanians, some part of them are looking for new opportunities. They are young, after school, university, they think they cannot find what they want to do here. Or the other group, older people, which want to change the conditions here. They have everything here, but for example, after some dramatic situation like death of some relative or family member, they decide to change everything and want to work for a job abroad, having education, etc. And also there is one group was analyzed, one group of the reasons why people accept. Okay, why they look for jobs, so it's clear, but why they accept. So actually it's a long list. Among them I have analyzed what I have found. It were mental problems, loneliness and closeness, naivety, honesty and trust in people. People were saying, I have done anything wrong, so others will not do either, you know. Like also convincing arguments by family members, friends and other acquaintances, including middlemen, which spread the information via the acquaintances. It's connected. Also convincing communication of exploiters, which are well psychologically prepared, and the message is well psychologically constructed, as migrant workers say, that they had to believe in everything. Also lack of education and awareness on employment procedures, as well as on labor rights, as well as what has to be checked before accepting the job proposal. So to summarize, actually, there are many reasons and they're different for every person why they accept the job proposals.
Thank you, Reda. And now we'll see how the situation is in Poland. Julia, please, floor is yours.
Thanks, Vineta. The way you say it, Poland, Germany, made me think of Eurovision. There we go. But thanks very much. Thank you for, of course, allowing me to be part of this. Thank you also to the Ministry of Interior for the Republic of Latvia and to the CAPE project. I was very fortunate enough to do the report on Poland, but I also acknowledge that there are in this meeting some experts who, such as Professor Zbigniew Lasocik, who I'm sure will be able to complement some of the things I say. When it comes to forced labor, I think we are seeing overall globally an increase in the discussion and recognizing it as a priority. That's certainly the case, for instance, in the UK and in the Netherlands. I think, however, that Poland still lags behind this kind of positive trend. And that's predominantly in two areas. Firstly, that's with regards to the definition. And secondly, with actual paying attention to the issue. In Poland, like in a few other countries, there is no definition of forced labor. There is, of course, human trafficking and various kind of misdemeanors around abuse of labor, but there's no actual definition of forced labor. Interestingly, last year in 2019, the Minister of Finance, Investment and Development did try to introduce the penalty for forced labor. There was a draft of a definition to be included in the criminal code, but since he submitted that to the Ministry of Justice, but then actually things went a little bit quiet. I tried to find out what's happening with that, but nobody seems to know. So if somebody here knows, I'd be keen to hear. But at the moment, there is no definition. And we know from reports such as, International Labour Organization, I see that Anina's here from HEUNI, they also kind of promote the idea that it would be a welcome venture to have a forced labor definition within national legislation, for the very fact that it would actually help to bring justice to many of the people who might not be captured by the human trafficking definition, but nevertheless are still exploited and still have wrongs done to them. we always say that in order to solve a problem, we first have to define it. And I think that definition, of course, starts in the law. So that's the kind of the first big observation that in Poland. The other one is, and it probably is rooted within the first one, is the lack of attention. The crime occurs. Poland is both a country of origin, so Polish people exploited in other countries, UK, Germany, Italy, but also it's a country of destination. People come to Poland from Ukraine, from Belarus, from Vietnam, and from many other countries, and are indeed exploited in Poland. So for a country that is both origin and destination, we would want a much more attention, and yet that is not the case. In the most kind of recent action plan, national action plan, the one for the year 2020 to 2021, forced labor basically features in two sentences. One is recognizing that entrepreneurs are an important target group for prevention and awareness raising, and another is a mention that there should be some sort of a poster campaign. But that's really it. And I think that's not enough. I think for a country where, for instance, in the UK recently, there was a big operation, it was called Operation Fort. So one police operation, one criminal organized group, and they uncovered 400 Polish victims in the UK. And we know that Polish people are exploited abroad in significant numbers. And like I said, we know it's a country of destination. So for a country that is clearly faced with this problem, the lack of attention, both in national action plans, in legislation, I think is very regrettable and very unfortunate. I think I'll be commenting on a few other points later on, but these are the two issues I'd first like to state as an introduction.
Thank you, Julia. And I would like to ask you straight away a question that what I found very interesting, that in your report you look on Poland from like a broader perspective, and you not just examine anti-trafficking legislation, but you give an overview of post-communist history as well as the state of labor rights in general. Mm-hmm. And could you please share with us your views on how this history and weak labor rights affect the response from society when it comes to human trafficking for labor exploitation?
Yeah, thanks, Vinet. And I think if possible, I'll actually expand on that a little bit more. I think here in agreement, I recognize so many of the names, and I can see most people are kind of experts in this field, and everyone's very well aware that exploitation is linked to, adverse effects on social, physical, economic welfare of the individual. And we often talk about vulnerabilities, how we define the word vulnerability. I'm sure that's for a whole other panel, but there is an agreement that these kind of vulnerabilities lead to exploitation. But I think it's actually important to take a step back and not just to think, okay, unemployment or poverty can lead to exploitation, but take a step back and think, well, where did those vulnerabilities come from? And I think there's a lot to be said for the state of social welfare in a country, and that is, of course, linked to the country's economics and the country's history, like you mentioned, and of course, the state of play when it comes to labor rights in Poland. So, in countries. Looking at labor rights, many countries, and it's not just Poland, have various kind of, let's say, contracts that people can be employed under that lend themselves to almost fostering a culture of tolerance of various unpleasant circumstances or even exploitation. In the UK, there's a lot of discussion about the 0-hour contracts. In Poland, we have something called specific task contracts. In Polish, we call it umowa o dzieło for our Polish colleagues here. And they're widespread in Poland. And in essence, these contracts, the minimum working condition standards don't always apply. The person is paid a fixed amount of money, no matter the time that they're spending on the employment. There's kind of less around social security contributions. And these contracts are, just like the 0-hour contracts in the UK and in a few other countries, they're deemed to be unfair towards the worker. But more importantly, they also create an environment where it almost seeps into the mentality of society that certain kind of, even if they're light exploitations, are tolerated, and that of course lends itself to later on maybe turning a blind eye to larger forms of exploitation. And the other thing I wanted to mention is about welfare, and I think that's that's my main point for today. I know we'll be talking about, who is the vulnerable populations, but a lot of those people are vulnerable because there was no kind of safety net for them to elevate their vulnerabilities. Taking homelessness for an example, not enough, certainly not in Poland and in many other countries, is being done to help the homeless, and we know that a lot of them are actually targeted for forced labor, and I'll be coming back to that. So my main kind of point, Vineta, really is that weak labor rights, poor contracts, they do foster that climate of tolerating forms of exploitation, and also a low expenditure on social security mean that people are not resilient enough to the offers made by traffickers.
Thank you very much, Julia, for highlighting this issue, because we also very often we see in other countries, also not in Poland, that of course this like the labor trafficking does not happen in an empty space, and it's like have a very deep roots, and very often there is this kind of perception that like, well, migrants, what can they really expect? They should be happy if they get anything, because what better did they have before? So till we change this mentality and perception which exists in society, then we can have any laws we want, but we cannot really get rid of exploitation. Thank you very much, and now I would like to continue with more specific questions, and I have a question to Reda. In your report, you describe a very specific scheme, how this private recruitment company in Lithuania cooperate with temporary employment agency in the country of origin. And the ultimate goal why these companies are established is to exploit migrants. Is there anything done how to eliminate these criminal agencies? Because this is quite obvious that there is no any other reason as only to cheat and exploit people.
Yeah, good question. Actually, yes, Lithuania has a good mechanism to fight against trafficking in human beings, including combating exploitation, labor exploitation in various situations in Lithuania and abroad. There is a law, there are a group of specialists in different institutions, etc. However, it is not sufficient. Based on the research, more has to be done under coordination of one agency or some multidisciplinary group to tackle the problem as regards the employment of Lithuanians abroad. Actually, I have checked the policies and the previous national action plans as regards the fight against trafficking in human beings and related crimes like forced labor and exploitation for forced labor. There are quite a few measures to fight this phenomenon. There are for trafficking in human beings, but there is no specifically to prevent the exploitative recruitment here in the country. And actually what I lack after this research, I think that Lithuania has to strengthen more the regulatory and control barriers. I mean that Lithuania need some specific obligatory guidelines for private employment agencies on rendering employment services, including the provision what has to be provided for the job seeker, including the work contract, which has to be in Lithuanian and signed before the travel if the person speaks Lithuanian. Also regarding labor exploitation, risk mapping, and responsibility of the agencies, of the private employment agencies which do not respect the guidelines, the code of employment ethics, services ethics with the main principles and standards. Also, I have seen many ads which include quite questionable information on the conditions in the employment abroad. So actually we need the legally binding requirements for job ads as regards job ads contents, and for administrators of online portals which publish those guidelines, so those ads. Also, we need to ensure that those private employment agencies, which mostly trap Lithuanians into exploitative labor situations, they bear responsibility for the actions. So I was thinking what could be applicable under these circumstances and under what I have found in the research. So I think that it would be good maybe to sign some zero exploitation statement by them, pledging themselves in a written form to ensure zero exploitation recruitment. On the other hand, probably those private employment agencies need training for their specialists how to do this. So maybe some webinar would be useful, and that each specialist which is involved in the employment services has to undergo this training. So to strengthen the control of the quality of the services is very crucial and important here at the moment, because I have checked, there have been very few cases as regards the exploitative labor situations abroad. I do not speak about trafficking cases, which are criminal cases, but I mean about administrative responsibility cases. And recently, all of them were closed because no grounds were found as some violation was conducted. So it was strange. Actually, there is some hole in the system why it is not possible to collect evidence and to prove this. Also, there is a lack of awareness raising and training. I mean, we have to distinguish the most vulnerable groups and construct the message and spread through the channels used by those vulnerable groups, as well as the specialists need to speak with one voice. You know, because I have checked that sometimes there are misunderstandings, and even in the criminal cases, police investigators say it's a trafficking case, prosecutors know, or prosecutors say it's a trafficking case, but in the court they're told that it is not a trafficking case for labor exploitation, etc. So they have to be trained together and, you know, to follow the same legal norms. What also is lacking, and I haven't found anything regarding the situational assessment on rendering employment services, especially as regards the employment of Lithuanians abroad. So first, we also need to do this to understand the scope of the problem. And of course, we need special measures in policies and action plans. And what would be also useful, based on the interviews, the labor attachés, which are sent to other countries, shall also coordinate the assistance to Lithuanians after exploitation in those countries of destination. Not only police attachés or not only NGOs, but also labor attachés which are there. Some Lithuanian communities abroad are also very strong, but they need some support from the government. It doesn't matter from the government of the country of destination or from the government of our country. They need some support, financial or personnel, to help the people who apply to them for assistance. So actually there are mechanisms in Lithuania, but I think they have to develop it.
Thank you very much. We see that a lot needs to be done and a lot is there, but maybe implementation is a bit lacking. But now I would like to ask Ilse to talk a bit more about the recruitment practices that make exploitation in the destination country easier. Because in your research, you talk about different recruitment practices, and some are almost kind of like hand the migrant into the hands of human traffickers. So could you please elaborate on it?
Yes, okay, thank you. To start off, it is important to mention that persons who become victims of forced labor in Latvia are mainly from third countries, and in Latvia those cases were from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan and India. And if about India we more or less know about the country itself, about the systems there, about how it is with employment there and everything, that about countries like Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, there is no data available that much. You kind of don't know what's with the employment situation there and everything. There is lack of data. And Yes, and also those countries have completely different culture and system of all the processes, and also the work recruitment process is different there than it is in Latvia. In those countries, those persons come, work recruitment process and searching for work is first of all non-systematic. It means that that process doesn't include steps as finding a vacancy, applying for that, going through the work interview, having some training course, or even having a contract. And other word to describe this work recruitment process is that it is non-formal. And non-formal means that more or less in the home country, those people find work through their relatives or people that are known to them or have some kind of reputation who can help find the work. That's how in our cases, persons from Tajikistan and Uzbekistan came to Latvia. It was through somebody who told them, who promised them some things, and that was a trusted person to them. And information about possible work in those countries is spread from mouth to mouth, and any work-related agreements are usually made verbally, which is very common for them, and they say that it is more trusted and stronger agreement when somebody promises you something than any paper. So it is normal that if a person that is their national promise this work, they have no reason to not believe, and trust for them is a very strong value, and that also kind of correlates with the fact that they don't consider any risks, and the reason also can be culture. For example, when we work with the clients from Tajikistan, they explain that future is in God's hands, so they cannot and they don't think about what might happen because they cannot influence that. And it showed also in preventive work. Then when after the support program was finished, and when we asked them what they could do differently to not get in this situation again, more or less all of them wrote that they could not do anything differently because what God will wish for them to have in their future, that will happen. So there is no kind of learning from your mistakes. Of course, maybe practically they will doubt, distrust or something, but in general terms, risk is something not recognized for them because everything happens how it should be happening. And yeah, and considering all that, this like a system or formula of the forced labor is quite simple. You need a person from the country where is poor circumstances, poverty, lack of employment possibilities, and also you need a person who to whom he trusts, that offers him not only work but some other attractive elements like big salary, maybe some apartment, of course the documentation process that it will be solved and everything. And yeah, and then they need also the country where are the agencies that help with all that process, because they actually, those workers don't need to know anything. They don't need to know the language, they don't need to know how to get a visa or residence permit or how to make a contract if there is even needed a contract, because this agency kind of takes care of everything. And of course, the thing is that they also don't check the information that is given. Also based on this trust, they trust all information. They don't check what is the system in destination country, what kind of language they will speak, where to go in this, in the case of emergency, in the case of if you need to find apartment, everything is kind of taken care of from the person they trust. And yes, when they come here, the trust is, these things doesn't happen, and then they have nothing left but this trust that maybe it will get better later, because they have no knowledge, no resources, no tools, nothing to get out of this situation. Because imagine if you come to the country and you have seen only the inside of some minivan that takes you from airport to some kind of very bad house, then to work, to house, you know nothing. Only maybe you can see is that it's green outside, it's day or it's night, that's it. So you have no even smaller tools how to get out from that situation. And they, those who recruit those people, use that a lot. They build trustful relationships and use them, use this culture element, and that is on that they base this system of using this forced labor. So that's it from me about this.
Thank you very much. We see that culture plays also a very significant role when we talk about human trafficking and cultural differences and how people see perceive different things. But then talking about people and talking about victims, who are the victims, and did you identify in your research any specific personal or systemic vulnerabilities that facilitate forced labor? Because of course not all vulnerable migrants become victims of trafficking. So who are these people? And if I could ask, I would like to ask all of presenters to speak a bit about this issue. And as the first one, Luiza, could you please start?
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, from this research, I think I would come up with some topics which are well known to all the listeners and speakers here, which are in general people with not so many perspectives in their home countries, as we heard from the other speakers, with very weak economical perspectives in their home countries. Persons who have very little or no German language skills, for example, and who don't have any knowledge about their rights, labor rights and rights in general. So these are the people who are quite affected in general. They also have a lot of debt from the interviews I took with affected migrants. A lot of them told me that they have debts back at home, so they are even more forced to gain money in a even more short period of time. But in general, what is interesting, especially if we look from the exploitation within Europe, the EU countries, which is a lot. I mean, Germany is a destination country, and we have a lot of people coming and are exploited in Germany from Romania, from Bulgaria, from Poland, etc. Is that there is, even we talk about EU countries, and we all know that there is a big pay gap between these countries, and as long as this pay gap exists, I think this problem of labor exploitation and forced labor will be present. So this is maybe a long-term goal within the EU concept to try to equalize the economies and the income forces of the different countries. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Thank you. And is it similar in Poland, Julia?
Thank you. Thanks, Vineta. I think, again, we need to kind of caveat all our answers. I already mentioned how in Poland the forced labor is not it's not high up on the agenda, which of course translates to how many cases there are, whether identified or prosecuted cases. And in turn, this also allows us to really shed light on the patterns on that question on who are the victims. So I obviously spoke to victims for the purposes of this report. I have actually worked at a safe house for victims of human trafficking in the UK for about 5 years. So I have quite a lot of kind of experience by talking to them. There are various cases in academic papers, newspapers reports. So we can start to kind of get a picture in our heads, but it really needs to be caveated that the data still is not there. So we still don't 100% understand everything. But two things that kept cropping up for me, and I think I noticed this particularly when I was working at the safe house. There was a lot of Polish victims there. They were all male victims of forced labor, and two things stood out. One is homelessness, and the other one is having a criminal justice past or a criminal justice future, i.e. there's a sentence pending and they're escaping that sentence. And these two sometimes go hand in hand. Sometimes the people ended up being homeless because they left prison. There was nothing there for them. And that goes back to my first point about the lack of welfare provision, social welfare from the state. The victims in forced labor that I have come across, again, were predominantly male, but I would hate to say it's a male problem. I think, again, we're still learning. Forced labor has only kind of been on the agenda for a few years. Like I said, there's no statistics, and it actually would be interesting. And if anyone has the money to do the research, to find out more about forced labor amongst women. But when I asked one of the victims for the purpose of this report, why do you think you ended up a victim? Why do other people end up victims? Who are victims? He didn't again say, oh, it's because I was homeless or because I had this criminal past and I couldn't get a job. He actually did say that point that I've been raising here is he said, the state didn't help me. I had no family social network. I had nothing from the state. I was homeless. I couldn't get a job. And he said, sometimes the criminalized organized groups, they're offering you something that the state should have offered you, but it didn't. Hope, job, security. And I know you asked one of the panelists beforehand, do they know about risks? And he said, yeah, of course it sounded dodgy. Like they offered me a job. They didn't know me and they said, get on a bus in 2 hours. But what was I to do? It was going to be another cold night on the street. So yes, I accepted the job. And I kept seeing this again and again. I mentioned earlier this big case that was uncovered in the UK, Operation Fort, 400 Polish victims. Most of them, again, were homeless. A lot of them had criminal past. So I think these are two areas that are really important to start doing a little bit more work on and more research and thinking of better prevention measures around these two particular vulnerabilities.
Thank you. It's actually absolutely horrific that for some people, human trafficking sounds as a better alternative than the one they are living in. Reda, do you have anything to add from Lithuanian perspective?
Of course I do. I have analyzed the characteristics of migrant workers who experience exploitation abroad by 3 groups: gender and age, family situation and place of residence, and education and occupation. So what I see that mostly Lithuanian men appear in exploitative situations abroad, and mostly they are up to 60 years old. But the major group of them are from 20 to 40 years old. Very few women so far have experienced exploitation abroad based on what I have succeeded to collect. As regards the family situation and the place of residence, it's very common that those migrant workers are from one-parent families or incomplete families. So they are either single, either widowed, either divorced, and have some dependents whom they need to take care of. Some of them are, of course, from dysfunctional families, but not so many. The majority of them are from small towns where they do not have job opportunities. Quite many of them have poor conditions at home or live in shelters. However, the research shows that there is also part of the exploited migrants who live quite well in normal living conditions in Lithuania, but just because of new opportunities, they want to change for a job abroad and so appear in exploitation. As regards education and occupation, actually there is a variety of different situations, but the bigger part of exploited migrants have very low level of education, mostly 9 or 10 classes at secondary school. Some part of them secondary education. The majority of them have no profession, or the profession is not demanded in the labor market here. So it's a problem. It means they look for jobs somewhere else. Quite many of migrants are jobless or have a temporary job, and they are seeking to have a permanent job abroad. And some of them have even higher education, speak foreign languages, but they want to generate extra income, for example, during their vacations and travel abroad, or they want to find the same type of job abroad for a better salary. And the other peculiarities, as I have told, we have quite many disabled trapped into exploitative situations. Also, some of them appear under such situations because of psychological characteristics like loneliness, closeness. Probably it's in our culture as well, that people are too shy to ask or to clarify. Also naivety, honesty, trust in people, as I have mentioned. So, you know, like all these features make one bunch of different characteristics.
Thank you, Reda. And now going to Latvia, you mentioned, Ilse, already previously, who are the identified victims in Latvia? Is there anything like particular you would like to add?
Yes, in our research and also our statistic that I mentioned before shows that those are mainly men. If 2019 from all the clients 2 were women, then in 2020 statistic is very constant, those are men. We should say that those are all ages, those are not only young men. If from India we had cases of young men, then we also have middle-aged men and also men that are almost retired who become victims of forced labor. They all come from developing third countries, means that countries with very low levels of economy, with unemployment and problems like this. In Latvia, 2 countries come up, those, as I mentioned before, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and now India as well. The important thing to also mention that they are brought here, or they come here in groups. Group consists of different ages. Let's say that group of 16 persons from Tajikistan, and it's enough that one person knows Russian language, or maybe in rare cases English language, and others they don't know languages. So all this goes to the one person who at least know the language, for example, Russian. Others, more or less, they know only their home country language, they don't know the languages. Their education level is low, even though many of them try to convince institutions in Latvia, police as well, that they have higher education, but we doubt that, just because if they simply don't know that there should be a contract, or they don't know any languages, or they don't know how to look for help, shows a little bit differently. But as I said before, it's very hard to receive or get any information about countries like Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, so it is doubtful. Then also in Latvia, they work in fields of construction, agriculture, and manufacture, as I mentioned before, which is not the profession of those people. More or less all migrants who get in situations of forced labor, they don't work in professions that they are good at or that they know. For example, those who work in construction have no experience or no education that they can work in construction. And of course, more or less, to become victim of forced labor, this percentage increases if they work illegally or break migration laws in any case. Yeah, that is the profile of the average victim of forced labor.
Thank you. I would like here to conclude our discussion about recruitment practices. If you have any questions which were not addressed, please write the question in the chat. But let's move now from recruitment stage to the exploitation phase. And I have a question to all presenters. What is the perception of migrant work in your countries, and are there links between the demand for and the perception of migrant labor in your country, and then instances of labor exploitation? And maybe I could ask Julia to start.
Sure. That's actually, I think, one of the hardest questions, you know, to get the perception, to get into the psyche of the mind of society. And I did a quite substantive research on this. I spoke to a few people, and hopefully my answer will begin to shed some light, although I'm not promising to give all the answers. So firstly, in contrast to countries like UK and Germany, I think there's less debate in general about migration in Poland, probably because there's just less migrants. But that is not to say that the debates are not absent. I think if you've been following the news, you might have seen some of the poor kind of stance towards, for instance, taking in asylum seekers in Poland, and kind of taking on the general responsibility that all EU countries had to take. And there was quite a lot of actually poor narrative from the government, you know, framing some refugees as even a terrorist threat and various diseases. So there's that thing to kind of bear in mind. But when it comes to migrant workers, the first point is to note that one of the highest groups are Ukrainian workers, and of course some of the other from some of our other neighboring countries. And on the whole, it seems, and again, you know, this is kind of just going on some research, some statistics and polls that were taken, but on the whole, it seems that towards Ukrainians, Czechs, Slovaks, Lithuanians, but also Vietnamese, the Polish population is quite favorable. They see them that they assimilate easily, you know, they learn the language, and above all, they work some of the jobs that either the Polish people can't, because they're abroad elsewhere working those similar jobs. And, you know, they find that they help the country better. You know, they're babysitters, they're cooks, they work in Uber, etc. And I think there's also a certain kind of mirror in the sense that Polish people recognize that the migrants in Poland are doing similar work that Polish people are doing in the UK, in the Netherlands, etc. There's less of a positive attitude when it comes to migrant workers from Africa or other Asian countries. So that's in terms of perception. Official kind of research with official employment places show that the reason that migrants are hired was not necessarily because they provide lower costs, but because actually there's just a shortage of labor force in Poland. But when we look into the more irregular and underground economy, it seems that lower cost is indeed the driving force. So there is a difference. There. And on the whole, you know, there is a bit of a mentality still that because, you know, they might accept lower wages. Somebody here was earlier talking about, you know, the wage disparity between EU countries, that you know, you can't push that bit and you know, offer them lower wages and they might be taken. So we're not always talking about forced labor. It might be other kind of weaker exploitative practices, such as, you know, maybe getting somebody to stay extra hours, paying them just below that minimum wage, and that seems to again be somewhat tolerated in the mindset. Again, this is, you know, there hasn't been an in-depth research into that, but this is what it would appear. Yeah, and I think that's the main kind of point. But it's such an interesting question, and one that I think we should really do more research on.
Thank you, Julia. Luiza, could you please? How is it in Germany?
Yes, in Germany, I would also say you have to first differentiate. You talk about high-skilled or low-skilled jobs. That's a big difference. But in our topic here, we encounter more the low-skilled jobs and sectors. So we talk about that. And regarding the low-skilled sector, as I mentioned before, there is a big gap in specific sectors, low-skilled sectors, where German citizens would not be interested or are not interested to take the jobs. So this big gap is filled by migrant workers mostly, like in the agricultural and care work industry. And this is on the one hand. On the other hand, we have a lot of exploitative situations. And as Julia said before, it's not only about forced labor and labor trafficking cases, like really criminal offense cases, but it's also about labor-related cases like working too many hours, not getting paid or the over hours, or don't having vacation, etc., etc. So it can start. This is like the base actually, where we have a lot of cases in Germany, and the demand on the one side and the systematic exploitative conditions on the other side is the paradoxon I see in this country, and the question is how did it emerge? And you can see it from a societal perspective, but also like what did policy do to fight against this? And my findings in this research was where that the policy has not protected enough this group of people actually, and not because in Germany there are not sufficient laws in place, but also because there are, for example, no controls. There's no instance or not enough stuff from the authority side to control these laws and to control the working rights of these people. And the next thing is when it comes to criminal offenses and labor trafficking offenses, that there is not sufficient training, as it was mentioned before. There is like judges, especially judges and prosecutors, are not trained enough and don't have specific knowledge on these criminal offenses. So this is a big lag. This is why this should be enforced to try to make it in a better way. But also now in the pandemic, it came to the surface that actually, like especially the care work, which played a big role in the pandemic time now, is not valuated in the right way. Also, German care workers were complaining a lot, saying, we work so much and we work so many over hours, but we don't get paid enough. So it was not only like a migrant problem, but also like from the German society, that this kind of low-skilled or not, at least not high-skilled works are not evaluated enough. But at the same time, now during the pandemic, it was like a systematic relevant job, was considered like a very relevant job. So there is this imbalance, and yeah, to bring it to an end, I think there is a two-class labor market in Germany. So there is a big gap between people who know their rights and know how to protect themselves better than somebody who comes here and take a job without even knowing the language. That's it, I think, from my perspective.
Thank you. And how migrant labor is perceived in Latvia?
Yeah, so it is migrant labor in Latvia is kind of new phenomenon. So we don't have research or strong data to show how society what society thinks about that, but we have to say that society has its own opinion about migrants in general that shows a lot, and that is negative. Like in 2018, there was a research about like how society perceives immigration when the migrants from countries that are not in EU come to Latvia, and 40% of Latvians responded that it is a problem, not as an opportunity, for example, to fill the workplaces where there are no employees. So for us, we see it as a threat or a problem or something that we don't want here. But employers at the same time think a little bit differently, especially those who have these workplaces that need seasonal workers, especially in summer. Employers are bringing workers from Ukraine and nearest countries that are not in EU workforce, because we just lack here Latvians or Latvian citizens or residents who would take those workplaces. So from one side we have this negative perception of immigration in general, but on the other side we have economy that, especially at the seasonal time, has a lot of issues, because agriculture cannot grow if we don't have workers. And so also these agencies are more needed for those employers, because if they don't know how to bring workforce to Latvia, they will ask services from agencies that can provide temporary workers. And there starts maybe the problems that we spoke about before. But it's a good question to be researched in Latvia, because we know that we need workers, but at the same time we don't want immigrants. So what could be the solution? And maybe if we push that button, maybe we can even change opinion about society's perception of immigration, not to think not as a problem but as an opportunity of economical growth, because it is a reality for us that we need more workforce in Latvia in many fields. So that's it.
Thank you. Very interesting. And Reda, I know that you did not focus on Lithuania as a destination country, but would you like to comment how the situation is in Lithuania regarding migrant work?
Yeah, I can reflect a bit. In Lithuania, we have mostly third countries nationals arriving for work. And they are Belarusians, Russians, Ukrainians, some of them Tajikistan, Moldova, Georgia, and other countries in that region. How we perceive labor migrants, they are seen like cheaper labor, and like the employment is paying lower salaries and saving more. And these workers are actually popular among businesses here in Lithuania. The pandemic situation a bit decreased the amount of third country workers here, but I think once it is removed, the situation is stabilized, I think we will have more and more workers from these countries.
Thank you. And I see that we are running a bit out of time, so we'll we'll try to wrap it up. And when we came up with this idea that we would like to research the situation of trafficking for labor exploitation in our member states, then I was a little bit concerned. I was thinking, well, but there are several research done already. Like a few years ago, there was a Stringa project coordinated by Heuni, and also looked at recruitment practices and trafficking for labor exploitation. So I was a bit worried whether we'll have some new findings. Maybe just basically we will conclude the situation hasn't really changed. But when I was reading the report, there were several issues that really surprised me, even if I have been working with these issues for more than 15 years. You all also are experts in human trafficking, so I'm very curious to know which findings were the most kind of surprising or new for you. Could you please share it with us? And how could I have been starting in alphabetical order and then in reverse order. Maybe we could just, Luiza, would you like to start?
First thing, during this research, what I found really interesting, I mean, I have to say I'm not a lawyer from my background, but what I found out was that there is, so far, there is no criminal law for corporations in place in Germany, and there are a lot of countries within Europe, at least who have this in place for many, many years, which in Germany is not the case. And if you have this in place, then you could also proceed forced labor and labor trafficking cases within a company. Now, apparently in Germany, it's on the way. Since this year, the Justice Ministry, the Justice Ministry started with the idea of implementing the criminal law for corporations in Germany, which is, I think, a long way to do, but it seems like it's going to be the case in 1 or 2 years. From what I understood, it's also interesting because in this process, when they implemented, and the criminal law for corporations is having a lot of different sides, not only our topic, that is necessary to increase the amount of prosecutors working on that topic, and this may be a chance also to stick into this moment and to promote the necessity of specialized prosecutors also for anti-trafficking, anti-labor trafficking cases. So this was one interesting finding for me, which is a good news, let's say. Let's see how it goes and how fast it will be implemented and how the practical side will be in a couple of years. But this one thing. And the second thing, what I found out was that especially when it comes to, there's a big legal insecurity in Germany when it comes to criminal trafficking cases. And this is why a lot of training has to be done steadily with prosecutors and also judges. But not only in the criminal law direction, but also in the labor law direction, because like forced labor cases are connected with labor law topics, like, for example, the minimum wage. So you have to know the details about the minimum wage, who is allowed to get the minimum wage, a foreign worker, in which circumstances, and so on. If you're not firm about this knowledge, this could have a big impact on the criminal case. So I think training should be combined on anti-trafficking, on the criminal code of trafficking cases, but also connected to the labor laws, which are surrounded by this topic. So this is from another interesting point that I found out. And to keep it short, I think I stop it here.
Thank you, Luiza. Julia?
So I'd like to say one positive thing, if I can, first, and then I'll get to the negative. And like you, sometimes I think nothing will surprise me, and then so much surprises me. The positive thing is, so a lot of the victims in forced labor are what we call non-ideal victims, right? They don't look like the victims we think victims will look. And yet they are now getting more and more identified, particularly for Polish people exploited abroad. Now, I know I keep talking about this case in the UK, but I just thought it was so phenomenal that these people, and I worked with them, and some of them were challenging individuals, and some of them were great individuals, but they did not at all look like the ideal victim kind of theory would make us think that they should. And yet they were identified. They appeared in front of police. They quickly got into the NRM, and on that side, nobody almost questions their victim status. And that really, really was such a positive thing to see. So there's some hope, and that was great. But now for the negative. I think when it comes to Poland specifically, two things really surprised me, perhaps maybe made me more sad. It's still the lack of funding for NGOs, particularly around forced labor. One of the experts I interviewed, talked about, said, and I've got a quote here, how can they deliver anything when all they get is when the whole system gets about 250,000 euro a year? How can you run safe houses for victims of forced labor and split them into male, female family? I mean, you can't, is the answer. So that surprised me that such little funding is being given. And the other is a type of exploitation, and that's that's for fraud. So the victims come over. They're made maybe sometimes to do small bits and pieces of work, but there's a lot of getting them to sit around, but taking their details and exploiting them for fraud purposes, which I know everyone's aware of here. But I think the scale of it and listening to that, and then how hard it is to build your life up after that, how hard it is to open bank accounts when somebody opened 10 bank accounts in your name and got you a national insurance, and there's been a lot of dodginess. So, you might be in that reflection period, but actually it's so hard because of that experience. And that really surprised me. And again, I think just made me more sad than anything.
Thank you, Julia. Was there anything, Reda, also positive and negative that surprised you in your research?
I don't know what I can say, it's positive or negative, but I was surprised by the creativeness of the owners of the agencies in Lithuania, the recruitment agencies and the temporary work agencies abroad and businesses abroad, which have created closed chains to recruit and exploit Lithuanians to generate huge income from labor exploitation, and to organize the business so that the information does not reach law enforcement, or it is difficult for law enforcement to uncover those cases. Also, I was surprised that they do not bear responsibility for this. Actually, in Lithuania, as far as I have found, only one legal person was prosecuted for trafficking so far, has been so far. And also, they are not, being businessmen, they are not afraid to conduct such illegal activities, in my understanding. On the other hand, I was also surprised why Lithuanian job seekers do not check the information, why they are not interested where they're going to work abroad, and why they do not check who is offering the job. That they trust fully anyone who offers good conditions. And it is in many cases when they appear in the exploitation in the country of destination. Also, what is very important that the control and regulation mechanism as regards the employment services in Lithuania at the moment is really weak, and it has to be reconsidered.
Thank you, Reda. And now to Latvia. Have you seen it all, or there were things that surprised you as well?
Well, since our organization also work with legal migrants hand in hand together with like a human trafficking field, it is hard to surprise us, especially when we did this research, when we researched and the target group was migrants. So, but it is always surprising when you hear about the circumstances where these forced labor victims live and what they have as their living conditions. For example, we have like a situation when around 20 men were living in some basement on old mattresses for few months and in the center of Riga, and you just think that somebody must have seen it because it's center of Riga, that a lot of people are brought with a minivan there every day to some small space, but I guess social responsibility in our society is not that much developed, and that is not a sensitive target group that we feel sorry for. Like maybe if those were women, maybe it would be differently and somebody would pay attention. But generally, we have all the cases we find are now lately that those workers come to us. There is no a responsible citizen that sees something, that sees that employer that sees something that is not correct, that is against the law, and that is of course surprising. We need to work when we educate our society to notice those things, because when you hear those descriptions, how people are brought here, how they live, under which conditions, how many hours they work, it's hard to believe that it happens next to us in such a small democratic country. And but from smaller things, we thought about the fact, which is kind of surprising and not quite clear why, when the person comes to is brought to work in Latvia, this agency has to give information to migration department about the first working place. For example, if the person will work in company A, agency gives information to migration department about this workplace A. But agency has a right to rent this employer to several others, and then they don't need to give this information. So we all know that those agencies are kind of renting companies, that they will rent to many places, but we don't ask information about these other workplaces. And then we have persons who have in several months lived in 17 and more working places with 17 and more employers, and it's just surprising that that is not regulated, knowing that we all know what those agencies do and for what they are made. So those are a few things that surprised us.
Thank you.
And also Gita shows me what surprised her when she spoke with people from Tajikistan, and very surprising what they said was if they would have a chance to earn at least €2 per day in their own country, they would not go anywhere. It's just, you can compare what is the situation there and what is the situation here. If €2 per day there is enough, we can imagine in what kind of conditions and with what kind of economical level they are living there, and why they want to come here, earn for them and their families.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And like several of you mentioned, that we want to see these ideal victims, and if they do not look according how in our perception the ideal victim should look, then it's easier just to turn to other side and ignore these people, unfortunately. Now I would like, we are close to finalize our discussion, and as promised, I would like to give a chance for those who have any questions to ask to our panelists, and I would like to pass floor now to my colleague Andrew Muyai, advisor at the Council of the Baltic Sea States, if he could summarize if we have any questions and moderate this question and answer session.
Yes, thank you, Vanetta. We have some questions have been answered in the chat, but we have the first question comes from Tom Griffiths. I guess it's directed to everybody, but I'm sure Julia has something to say about this. How do citizenship rights affect the response to forced labor and the ability to detect and protect victims? Does being an EU citizen make a difference, and how is Brexit having an impact on these issues? That's the first question. Julia, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question. I think somebody actually answered part of it. Gary, who I see is gone, he talked about how difficult Brexit will make it for people. It will push them more underground. He mentioned about the kind of hostile environment, and I think that's all true. But at the same time, I think, well, I'm going to speak from Poland. When I was working at the Safe House, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, the majority of the victims, in fact, were Polish. Let's say if we had space for 27, I think 24 at one point were Polish. And then I was talking to my colleague who's still there, because I no longer work there, and she said that she's got about 2 Polish people. Now that is a complete anecdotal evidence. It's just one Safe House in Manchester, but it did show. But she did say, we haven't had many Polish for some time, and it's really interesting to note whether, for instance, the Polish will be going, more to Germany, more to Italy, just because of Brexit, and therefore not necessarily that they won't be as exploited, but they might be exploited now in different countries. And again, I think that's such an interesting space to research. It would be really great to, for instance, survey all the safe houses in the UK to see if they are, or even just look at NRM statistics to see if they are seeing a decrease in Polish or any other kind of EU countries.
Thank you. And maybe just quickly, kind of the same question to Latvia, with the third country nationals being exploited in Latvia. Are there access to assistance and rights limited if they're not Latvian citizens, simply?
Yes, I might not know about that much, but of course it depends on the residence that you have. If you have a just visa or temporary residence or permanent residence, you need to have, as I know, you need to have health insurance to access like health services, and the rights that citizens, EU citizens get, and the rights that third country nationals with different residence permits get are very, very, how to say, opposite almost. I don't know, maybe Gita wants to add something. Yeah, so those are the main things. Yes, they are, as you can say that they have a bigger risk to not get help in many situations, just because access to many systems, as in health system or education or wherever, is very limited for them.
Thank you. We have one more question from Lasma Stabina. Her question is for all the researchers, and the question is it clear in your countries when it comes to the use of terminology, labor exploitation, forced labor, human trafficking, are these concepts used and understood as synonyms, or is there a clear understanding among the national authorities on what these concepts mean? How and by whom the victims are identified and so on? Is there a clear understanding when it comes to the terminology? We can start with, for example, Luiza.
Yes, I think there is not a clear understanding of the terms, because also in Germany the implementation of the EU directive 2011/36 to find human trafficking was implemented partly by the renovation of the criminal law, taking into account now like that the forced begging, for example, is also part of a human trafficking case, which was not the case before 2016 in Germany. So this is like a renovation of the criminal law, the human trafficking criminal law, since now 4 years. So I've seen also in the back that doing trainings with police officers, talking with the prosecutors, actually there's very little knowledge about this concept and about the definitions of these terms, but also in the context of labor law. So I think there's a lot to do ahead. So no, the question I would answer was no. So big confusement in terms of the terminology. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to add?
From Poland, actually, I was going to do a bit of a cop-out answer and invite, or maybe more of an inclusive answer. And I know we have Professor Zbigniew Lasocik here, if he's still here. But maybe Professor Lasocik, you could actually comment a little bit about terminology and things in Poland, if I can put you on the spot, if you're still here as well. Let's have a look.
I think he's here, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of terminology?
So the question basically was, how is the different terminology, forced labor, human trafficking, exploitation, how are those understood? Are they understood in Poland? Does it have any impact? Do the policymakers understand these terms, and does it have any kind of impact on the wider phenomenon and tackling the phenomenon?
Yes, that's why I thank you very much. This is a very important point. I raised these two issues in my questions. First of all, I think there is misunderstanding with forced labor. and exploitation in countries like Poland, where people are expected to work hard. If somebody complains that he's expected to work hard, people say, and this is the time, and we wanted that because we wanted democracy and free market. Don't complain. You came here to Poland to work hard. Don't complain. This is how it is. And then somebody mentioned, and you also raised this issue that Poland, as many other countries represented here, we left communism. And that was a time when everything was done instead of us. Everything was taken care of. Now we are responsible for everything. And the same argument is being used that you have to take care of yourself. Don't complain. Don't expect from the state any support. And the third question, the third point, which I'm very happy to hear from you, is to all of us. Why governments are not interested in combating forced labor? Many governments are very keen to struggle to combat sex trafficking or sex exploitation. But in our civilization, I think labor exploitation or forced labor is well hidden behind sort of facade or taboo of work, because work is something very noble. But all of a sudden we say there is a crime of forced labor. What do you mean? So maybe, going back to your question about terminology, maybe criminal justice language is not appropriate one. Maybe we have to change the language. And final sentence about slavery. That's why I asked whether in your countries forced labor is presented as modern slavery, because I think the metaphor of slavery is contradictory, does not help us to explain what in fact forced labor means. So these are from the top of my head comments or remarks. Thank you very much.
And this question you raise relates to the question by Anina Jokinen. If somebody wants to answer that, she asks about she raises the question of political will, and that it's extremely important when it comes to tackling labor exploitation. Absolutely. Are there any developments or changes in your countries when it comes to the political will or priority when it comes to these issues? Have you seen anything, Luiza?
Well, I think I mentioned it before briefly, but I think I was talking too fast, so I do it again now. The pandemic brought into light the really bad condition in the meat processing industry, and it went all over the media for a long time. So this is not the first time this is appearing, but it's a moment where the labor ministry was taking actions, and they are now to put in place an occupational safety program which will prohibit actually the contemporary work. So, but this is only for the meat processing industry. So the first thing to see is when it's in place from beginning of next year, how effective it will be, what is the end result of the legislative. First thing, second thing, how effective it will be in terms of is there enough control to check on the implementation, and if it's effective, to discuss if it's not possible to broaden it up for other sectors, because this is only for the meat processing industry, which is a good sign, but it should be also tackled in other sectors, because as I mentioned before, there are other sectors who have the same problems. So this is I would say a good development, the recent one, but it has to be controlled, and we have to follow it very carefully if it's really effective at the end of the day.
Anyone else wants to add about the political will?
I could add, based on my research, I see that in the area of tackling the labor exploitation, trafficking, and human beings for labor exploitation, post-labor, there is lack of political will. And I don't know why there is lack to tackle the exploitation of Lithuanians abroad, especially. There are very few measures which are organized to prevent this phenomenon. Thank you.
Vineta, I don't think we have any more questions in the chat.
I see there is a question from Emmy, or no, this is additional information.
There is one question from Susan that is partly answered by some. Are you aware of any European country that has now labor exploitation further defined in criminal law, separated from human trafficking? Anina Jokinen mentioned extortion at work discrimination in the Finnish legislation, and some Swedish participants mentioned a new legislation that came into place in Sweden. Is this something you would like to mention more about, Mats, from the Swedish Gender Equality Agency?
Yes, can you hear me now, Ingrid? Does it work?
Yes.
Since 2018, there is a new legislation in place, human exploitation, which is, I don't know if it's correct to say so, but it's a sub-law to the human trafficking law when it comes to exploitation of labor, for example. And you could compare it without going too far in the discussion. You could compare it when you file a report against trafficking for sexual purposes. You normally from the police side also cover up with a gross procuring case, just in the case that you do not reach all the way to trafficking. And I would say when you have a case of labor exploitation, you will use both these human exploitation and trafficking for labor. It will do the same thing. It will have the same purpose as the law against procuring when it comes to cover up for trafficking. Did you get it? Was I somehow clear? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I think it was clear, at least to me. Vineta?
Yes.
Or Anina also, I think. I'm sorry. Yeah, Anina Jokinen, please.
Sorry, I'm trying to make the camera work, but I guess it doesn't work. Because I would like to see you guys, but...
We would like to see you too.
Sorry, you can't see me. I even combed my hair, but yeah, okay. Thank you for the presentations. I just wanted to comment on, first of all, that we have this extortionate work discrimination law in Finland since 2006. So we have plenty of these cases because it concerns exploitation of migrant workers in Finland. And it's a crime resembling human trafficking, but always, of course, it's difficult to kind of see or draw the line between these two is a bit difficult occasionally, even though I think we have become better at this in the last few years. I also just wanted to comment on the political will issue, because I think it's extremely important now that we've had like a lot of media discussion in Finland recently about exploitation of Ukrainian workers, exploitation in the cleaning industry, and exploitation in Nepalese restaurants. And a lot of this discussion has then led to political will, and actually now there's like a lot of movement when it comes to like legislative changes and developing like concrete action points for the national human trafficking action plan. And finally, we are also getting a specialized police unit to investigate trafficking cases. So I think like as with the German presenter brought out this like importance of media attention, is that with media you also get kind of politicians interested in the topic. And I was thinking whether this issue then is not of interest in Poland, or what is the current government doesn't care, or what is the situation? Thank you.
I mean, I don't want to say they don't care, but there certainly doesn't seem to be much, appetite and will. I think what I mentioned at the start, the fact that forced labor features so low in the action plan. I think that speaks volumes, and I probably don't need to add further comments here. But yeah, there's definitely, and I'm sure Professor Lasocic will agree, there's definitely not enough political interest, not enough political will, not enough political understanding of the issue.
Thank you.
Okay, I think if there are no any more questions or comments, then we could end our discussion here. I would like to let you know that all the reports will be available on the CBSS website, cbss.org. Thank you very much, Lasma, for in the chat. The website is mentioned in the chat. Currently, only Polish report has been published. Latvian and German reports are now in Latvian and German languages, and they are being translated. So as soon as we have English translation, reports will be uploaded on CBSS website. And also we are finalizing Lithuanian reports, so it will be also available very soon on our website. And today we talked about the problems the report covers, but the reports not just identify the problem, but also provide detailed, action-oriented, specific recommendations. So you will be able to read the recommendations in the reports. And I would like to thank you all very much, panelists, participants, Andrit, for helping me to host this event. Thank you very, very much for an interesting discussion, and let's continue our work, and hopefully next time when we meet we already have more positive surprises to report to each other and to share.